Hello, everyone. We are here on another Tuesday afternoon. I am Jessica, the world's most productive nurse practitioner, and we're here with Office Half Hour. And I actually don't have any questions that I'm going over today. Today, it's just me talking. So we may not even go through the entire half hour. We may finish a little bit early, but I'm going to tell you a couple stories. So let's get started. I am, a fancy businesswoman, right, as a nurse practitioner. So I was meeting yesterday with my marketer because I have no skills when it comes to marketing. It's hard to admit that. It ties into a lot of the same things that we experience as nurse practitioners, especially when we're maybe a little earlier in our career, but really at any point in our career. Things like perfectionism, things like imposter syndrome. We don't want to admit when there are things that we can't do. Sometimes we don't even want to admit it to ourselves, right? And so we will work harder to try to make up that difference and to try to get the results that we're looking for, even if it's at our own detriment, right? So when it comes to things like time management and charting, that can look like working until 10 o'clock at night to finish your charts and taking charting home, working on the weekends, that sort of thing. But when you are a business owner like me, and you think you should be able to do your own marketing, you're spinning your wheels, right? Some people are great at it. They're called marketers. They're usually not called nurse practitioners. Pretty rare that they're both at the same time. But that difficulty in asking for help, for admitting that there are things that we're just not as good at, is really, really hard. So imposter syndrome, very common, very common among higher achievers, people who advance their careers, whether that is climbing the corporate ladder or going back to school, grad school, right? Like, nurse practitioner school. People that are driven, right, tend to be also commonly afflicted on one level or another by imposter syndrome, whether we want to admit it or not, whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not. And if you're not familiar with imposter syndrome, the kind of nutshell version of it is assuming, having this mistaken belief, right, that is internalized, that we're fraud. And it is simply a matter of time before our cover is blown and we are found out, and that we are actually frauds, and then we lose everything. And so if you're feeling that way, you're probably not likely to want to mention that, to tip your hand and tell somebody about that. And so you're going to do everything that you can to try and offset that for yourself, right? And again, that can come at our detriment professionally. So I was feeling a little imposter syndrome when it came to my marketing, and I finally had my moment where I realized I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. And I connected with a wonderful woman who is helping me with marketing stuff so that we can get the word out about chart magic, about time management, about charting efficiency, why I think it is so important, how it is my approach to fixing so many of the things that are wrong with healthcare. So she's going to help me like reach the masses in ways that I have not been able to. That's great. But she's a marketer. She's not a clinician. That's not her role. So we were talking a little bit about the things that I do, but also the folks that I work with, which tend to be nurse practitioners. And we were talking about charting. And one of the questions that she asked, because again, as somebody who's a marketer, she needs to kind of, assess where things stand and get a better understanding. So a context question that she asked was about any professional negative repercussions that can come from being behind on charting or being ineffective with charting or inefficient with charting. And I said, oh, yes. And one of my favorite stories that goes along with that is actually, I am so disheartened by this concept, but I think it's such a great example, is what I call the naughty list. And I worked for a large healthcare system, and it was a multidisciplinary group practice from the ambulatory side. There was also an inpatient side as well. The ambulatory side, we were, multidisciplinary, so we had kind of one of almost everything in terms of, departments. And I think there were over 100 to 150 providers. And if you had more than the cutoff for whatever the normal amount of, or the acceptable amount of open charts was in a given week, I think the cutoff was maybe 20 charts or something. So if you had more than 20 charts, you were put on the naughty list. And the naughty list had a list of everybody by department that had more than the number of charts open. And it said how many they had open, right? So if it was 21 or if it was 2000, right? Like it would say on this list. And then that list was circulated, not to everybody, but just to all the naughty kids, right? So all the providers who had too many charts open got put on this list, and then that list got sent around. Okay, really? Is that the best way? Is that the way to solve it? How is that going to empower somebody to feel like they can actually tackle the monster that is charting? How is that going to make somebody feel empowered as a provider, as a clinician? How is that going to make somebody who might be feeling those feelings of imposter syndrome, which can happen at any point in your career, by the way? It can happen like when you're a new grad, and it can happen when you've been doing this for 20 years. It can happen at any time. How would that make somebody who's experiencing imposter syndrome feel about asking for help, about asking for more time, maybe more admin time to get these things done, or some kind of workaround, even temporarily, more assistance, less patients, a smaller provider panel? How would that make them feel? That's not going to really open the door and make them feel welcome. That's not really going to open the door and make them feel like this is a safe space to do their work, period, but to ask for help when they need it, which is so common. We all need help at some point. It might be a small issue, it might be a big issue, it might be an acute issue, it might be a chronic issue, but we're all going to need to be able to lean on our system at some point. But if you don't feel like it's safe to ask for that help, and if you are in a culture where there's like a naughty list that goes around, that's not really going to breed that safe space vibe. That's not going to make people feel like they can ask for help. So what are they going to do? If you feel like you can't ask for help, what is your option? To try to work harder? Maybe that'll solve it. Doesn't, right? But you could try that. To quit and take another job somewhere else and maybe have the problem follow you. Maybe it'll follow you into a position where at least you're better supported. To get burnt out, I think that's probably the most likely case. I think all of that is crazy. Why do we let ourselves work in these environments? Why do we let that continue? I think we need to change that. Nurses, as a broad umbrella, we're the largest segment of the healthcare population from the workforce side of things. If change is going to happen within healthcare, the group that has the most influence, the most leverage by sheer numbers, if nothing else, are nurses. And I was explaining this also to my marketer. And I was explaining to her that the way I see it, we have waited for the change to happen. We've given the system, healthcare as a concept, as a construct, we've given that a chance. We've given admin a chance to fix things, to improve things, to make things safer for those of us who are working bedside in terms of staffing ratios, to make things better for those of us who are working in outpatient settings when it comes to panel size or acuity of patients or turnaround time before patients can be seen and follow up and access and all this sort of thing. We have given all of that a chance to sort itself out. And it's just gotten worse, right? So maybe instead of waiting for the problem to fix itself, that didn't get us very far. And instead of waiting for the solution to come from the top down to sort of trickle down to us, maybe it's time to kind of flip the script. Maybe it's time for the solution to come from the grassroots up, to come from us, to come from me, to come from you. It's worth a shot. When we feel burnt out, it's hard to see any hope. And it's hard to have the energy to commit to change, even the concept of change. When you're burnt out, it's all you can do to get through the day. So we need to navigate around burnout. We need to make changes to the system, to our little corner of the healthcare universe, to improve our own metaphorical backyard, right? If each one of us is able to clean up our own backyard, our own healthcare backyard, and make things better in our corner of the healthcare world, if enough of us do that, that can tip the scale. That does have the capacity to build momentum. That does have the capacity to make change, right? Instead of waiting for somebody else to do it, maybe we need to do it. Maybe that needs to come from us. So this came up with my marketing person because that's really how I see healthcare improvement and change happening. I think it needs to come from us. From my perspective and through my lens, the way that I can help to make that change is by helping people with things like time management and charting. I'm really good at it, and I can help you to be really good at it too. And when you have better control of your time, when you feel more in control of your day and like you can get your work done at work, and when you can actually get your work done at work, the net result is that you feel empowered and you are empowered. You can live life outside of work. You can honor the commitments to yourself, your family, your friends outside of work. You can prevent burnout. You can navigate around burnout. You can make it to retirement, right? Instead of feeling like there is no way I will be limping across the finish line if I even make it that far in this profession. We need you. Patients need you. Healthcare systems need you. Insurance companies need you to do the visits so they can make their money, right? They need us. So maybe we can use that as leverage to find a compromise that makes things better for everybody, right? That's my dream anyway. I can't do it alone. But I think that if enough of us can tap into that and can see it that way, then we can actually make change. When I got a master's degree in public health, my school asked us on the first day how we were going to change healthcare. They said, healthcare is broken. Healthcare is broken. And this was years ago. It's only become more broken, right? They said, healthcare is broken, and how are you going to fix it? And of course, they didn't expect us to have like our final answer at that point, right? It evolves over time. And my own answer has evolved over time, but the question has never left me. And public health is not just infectious disease. It's not just things like COVID and that sort of stuff. It's about the things that affect everybody, right? That shared experience. So it can be about super contagious infectious diseases, but can also be about things like climate change, because that clearly affects everybody. Animal health and things like that. You know, as climate change shifts and as our temperatures rise, we see ticks in more places, and we see Lyme disease spreading into new geographic areas, for example, right? So that's just one very narrow example. So public health is really multidisciplinary in that way, and the people who get that master's or doctorate in public health tend to represent a lot of different points of view. So that's something that I love about public health. And going through that with that peer group, with a lot of different voices at the table, really got me thinking about that question. And then the question, obviously, over the 2 years that we worked on this master's program, question came up again and again and again. How are you going to fix healthcare? And I graduated and I continued on. That question haunts me, will haunt me for the remainder of my working years and beyond, probably. How am I going to fix healthcare? Well, I think that working as part of the nursing discipline to empower as many nurses as we can, as many nurse practitioners as we can, to shift how we get through our day, to avoid burnout, to make us feel empowered. That's how I'm going to try to fix healthcare. So, what are you going to do? How do you want to fix healthcare? I love ideas. Feel free, comment below, shoot me a message, share your ideas. Tell me what you like about my ideas. Tell me what you don't like about my ideas, right? Because there's always stuff I haven't thought of. There's always room for improvement. That's another big part of public health too, is things like quality improvement and how we kind of go about that to make things better for everybody. That's the point of public health. But tell me where I'm wrong, right? Point out some things, point out some flaws in my logic, point out some things that I haven't thought of, right? But let's think about how we, not they, but how we can make healthcare better. Because I think the change is going to come from us. The change that we can live with, the change that we can work with, the change that we can swallow is going to come from us, right? So if you're in, awesome. If you're not in yet, that's okay. You will be. The time will come. You'll have your moment. But think about that. The question was asked to me, and now I'm passing it on to you. How are you going to change healthcare? How are you going to fix healthcare? I am going to let you go. I'm going to end class a little early this week. I'm going to let you kind of think on that question, okay? How are you going to change healthcare? How can we use this large segment of the healthcare population, the healthcare workforce, known as nurses, to our advantage? I will ask you nurse to nurse. How are we going to change healthcare?